I remember the exact moment things shifted. It was a Sunday afternoon, early fall, the kind of warm where the breeze still carried a whisper of summer. We were all packed into the family dining room like it was Thanksgiving, even though it was just a regular weekend. Dad had called for a family discussion, and when my dad says that, you show up. No excuses. Even if you're nursing a cold or just don't want to see your older brother's smug face, you show up. That's the rule when your family runs a business together. Or, at least, pretends to. My name's Barry. I'm 34 now, but this all started when I was around 26. I've always been the quiet one in the family, the listener, the fixer, the guy who doesn't cause drama. I guess in hindsight, that's what made me the perfect target. Dad's business was this semi-successful auto parts supply store. Nothing fancy. No tech startup glitz or flashy signage. Just a few dusty warehouses, an old building with a half-working AC unit, and a loyal stream of local mechanics and body shops who kept us alive. It had been in our family for over 3 decades. Dad started it from scratch, pouring every ounce of his energy into it. And he did well for himself. Not rich, but enough to buy a decent house, pay off 2 cars, and keep food on the table during the rough years. There were 3 of us kids. My older brother, Kyle, who's 5 years older than me and somehow convinced himself he's the heir to the family empire. My younger sister, Lauren, who never really wanted a part in the business and now works as a nurse in another state. And then me, middle child, steady as a rock, and largely invisible unless someone needs something fixed or paperwork filed. Kyle, though, he was always the loud one, the golden boy, the kind of guy who talks over everyone else and still somehow gets praised for taking initiative. He worked with Dad at the shop on and off, mostly on the sales side. He had a flashy smile, wore polos a size too tight, and talked like he was always on the verge of launching his own million-dollar company, even though he still lived in our parents' guest house well into his 30s. But I wasn't bitter. At least, not at first. After college, I majored in finance and quietly started helping Dad with the business end of things, spreadsheets, taxes, compliance, bills. I wasn't flashy about it. I didn't need applause. I just knew Dad was getting older and didn't want to see him drowning in overdue insurance premiums or forgetting which loan was up next. So I stepped in, little by little. I restructured some payments, refinanced one of the warehouse loans, and even paid some stuff out of pocket when things got tight and Dad didn't want Kyle to know. He was proud like that. He always said, "Don't worry your brother. He's got enough on his plate." I never told anyone how much I was helping. Maybe that was my first mistake. Fast forward a few years, and Dad's health started to slip. Nothing drastic at first, a few missed steps, a little confusion, forgetting appointments. But it got worse. Eventually, the doctor said the word we'd all been dreading: early-stage dementia. It felt like a gut punch. This man, who'd run a business by sheer will for 30 years, now couldn't remember if he'd mailed a check yesterday or 2 months ago. That's when Kyle really started hovering. I think he saw blood in the water. Suddenly, he was showing up more often, taking Dad out to lunch, talking about transition plans and modernizing the business. He even started calling himself operations lead in emails, which was laughable considering he hadn't touched the back end of the business in years. Meanwhile, I kept things running. Quietly. Efficiently. I paid off 2 lingering property tax bills that Kyle didn't even know existed. I renewed the business liability insurance when Dad forgot. I handled the loan restructuring on our second warehouse that was about to go into default, all out of my own pocket because I believed in the legacy. I believed in helping Dad. And, maybe, deep down, I thought Kyle would come around. That we were all on the same team. But I was wrong, and I should have seen it sooner. The breaking point didn't come all at once. It started with these small moments, a cold shoulder here, a snide comment there. Kyle would walk into the office and go, "Still doing all that boring paperwork stuff. Huh, Barry? Somebody's got to hold the clipboard while the real work gets done." He said it with a grin, but it stung more than I cared to admit. He started holding meetings without me. Told the staff not to worry about calling me for approvals. He once told a supplier that we don't need Barry's signature on that anymore. He's just helping out with the taxes. I laughed it off at the time, told myself it wasn't worth the fight. But those things build up. You can only be invisible for so long before you start to question whether you were ever really part of the team at all. The final straw came at that Sunday family meeting I mentioned. Dad had called us all in to talk about the future of the business. Lauren flew in for the weekend, which was rare, so we all knew it had to be serious. The living room was tense. Dad sat in his recliner, looking tired but alert, while Kyle paced around like he was hosting a boardroom pitch. He had a folder in his hand, probably full of charts he didn't understand, and he opened the meeting by saying, "I think it's time we made some real decisions about the business. Dad can't keep running it forever, and we need a clear successor." He looked around the room like he was expecting applause. Nobody clapped. Lauren shifted uncomfortably on the couch. I stayed quiet, waiting to see where this was going. Kyle continued, "I've been handling most of the operational stuff lately, so it just makes sense that I take over full ownership. I'm willing to buy out the family share at a fair rate." I interrupted, calmly, "You haven't handled any back-end operations. I'm the one keeping the business compliant and financially afloat." He scoffed. "Barry, you're good with numbers, I'll give you that. But you've never really been part of the day-to-day. You're not a leader. You've never contributed anything of real value." That hit like a freight train. I blinked. "Excuse me." He leaned forward, almost gleeful. "Come on, man. You've always been in the background. You were never in the shop, never closing deals. You're just there. A burden we all kind of tolerate because you don't make waves. But this is serious now. This is Dad's legacy we're talking about. Let the people who've actually built it lead it." I don't remember exactly what happened next, just this buzzing in my ears, this white-hot feeling in my chest. I looked at Dad, but he seemed confused, unsure, like he didn't even realize what Kyle was really saying. Lauren looked furious, but didn't speak. So I took a breath, looked around the room, and said, still calm, "Oi, if I'm just a burden, then I guess you won't mind if I step away from, well, everything I've been doing." Kyle raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "Filling out tax forms." I smiled. "Not a big one. Just enough." "No, Kyle. Like paying the property taxes, the business insurance, the warehouse loan refinancing. You know, the boring stuff that's kept the lights on for the last 8 years. His face drained of color. I stood up, gently pushed my chair in, and said, "But you're the leader now, right? I'm sure you'll figure it out." And I walked out. That was the moment the whole house went silent. Nobody followed me. Nobody said a word. I didn't expect Kyle to crash and burn overnight. I knew the unraveling would be slow, like a fraying rope, strand by strand, until suddenly the whole thing snapped. What I didn't know was just how deep his arrogance ran, or how far the rest of the family would go to defend it. After I walked out of that meeting, I went home and didn't look back. No follow-up calls, no dramatic texts, just silence. I half expected someone to reach out. Maybe Lauren, maybe even Mom. But the phone didn't buzz. The inbox stayed empty, and I let it. For once in my life, I didn't chase after peace. I just waited. 3 days later, the first email hit my inbox. Subject: Urgent, Business Property Tax Notice. It was addressed to me, like always, because despite all his bravado, Kyle had never updated the billing contacts. Apparently, he also hadn't noticed that the county sent those notices quarterly, and that one was already overdue. A week after that came the second notice: unpaid commercial insurance. That one was worse, because without it, the business wouldn't be legally allowed to operate for long. Especially not with that crumbling loading dock Kyle kept pretending didn't exist. But I ignored both. Not out of spite. Not yet. At first, I told myself this was a learning opportunity. Kyle wanted to lead, so let him lead. Let him see what it took to actually run something. I figured maybe he'd stumble a little, then come back, tail between his legs, and we'd figure it out like adults. Instead, I got a text from Kyle. "Hey, not sure if you forgot, but a couple of payments are late. Can you take care of it today?" No greeting, no apology, no acknowledgement of the grenade he dropped in front of the whole family days earlier. I didn't answer. 2 hours later, another one came through. "Barry?" The insurance called the office. "What's going on?" Still no please. Still no humility. So I did the unthinkable. I turned off autopay. I'd been using my own bank account to keep things afloat for years, but I'd left everything on a cycle: taxes, insurance, utilities, loan payments, just in case I ever forgot. That day, I shut it all down. I untangled my name from every account that wasn't legally mine, took my name off the insurance policy, canceled the tax prep retainer, and informed the loan officer that I would no longer be covering any upcoming installments on the warehouse note. The officer asked if I was sure. I said I was. Then I waited. And that's when things got ugly. Kyle didn't call me directly. Of course not. Instead, Mom showed up at my door the next evening. No warning. Just a knock. Then her silhouette through the frosted glass. I opened it reluctantly, already bracing myself. She didn't even say hello. "Barry, what are you doing?" she asked, stepping inside like she still had a key. "Kyle told me the business is falling apart. You stopped helping." I crossed my arms. I didn't stop helping. I stepped back. Like Kyle wanted. Her jaw tightened. "That's not what he meant, and you know it." I just stared at her. She sighed. "He's overwhelmed. He's trying his best. This isn't the time to punish your brother over some silly argument." "Silly argument?" I said, my voice flat. "He told the whole family I was a burden, that I never contributed anything. And now I'm expected to keep things running quietly? Behind the scenes?" Mom looked uncomfortable. "Kyle didn't mean it like that." "Yes, he did," I said. "And he's not sorry." She didn't answer that. Just stood there, wringing her hands like she was the victim. I stepped aside and pointed to the door. "I'm done funding a fantasy. If Kyle wants to be in charge, then he's in charge, bills and all." She left, but not before giving me one last look. The kind of look that said, "You've disappointed me." That stung more than I wanted to admit. The next week was radio silence. No one reached out. No one updated me. But I heard through Lauren, who'd gone back to Oregon, that Kyle had started cutting staff hours until things stabilized. I heard he missed another loan payment. That the supplier Kyle owed started demanding prepayment instead of invoicing terms. Still, I stayed quiet. Kept my head down. Focused on my freelance finance work. Every so often I'd get a notification from one of the accounts I used to monitor, like a ghost limb itching, warning me of a late notice or a delinquent flag. I'd delete it. Then came the blow that changed everything. It was a Thursday. I remember because I had a client Zoom call scheduled at 2 p.m., and right before I logged in, my phone lit up with a picture message. It was from Lauren. A photo of Dad. In a hospital bed. The caption underneath just said, "Kyle didn't tell anyone. I just found out." I felt like the ground had vanished under me. I called her immediately. She picked up on the first ring. "Barry, he fell." A neighbor called 911. Kyle was supposed to be checking on him. My chest tightened. When? 3 days ago. 3 days. No word. No message. Nothing. I canceled the meeting. Booked a flight for the next morning. When I walked into the hospital room, Dad looked frail, like a husk of himself. Eyes cloudy. Confused. The nurse said he'd been asking for someone named Bear. That's what he used to call me when I was little. Kyle showed up that night. He strolled into the room holding a smoothie like he was visiting a friend, not checking on the man he'd ignored for days. When he saw me there, his face dropped. "You're here," he said, like it was an accusation. "You didn't tell anyone he was in the hospital?" I replied coldly. He rolled his eyes. "It was a minor fall. He's fine. He's 83, Kyle." And he hit his head. He shrugged. "I've been dealing with a million things. The business is a mess. The bills are late. I've had to let 2 people go already. Maybe if someone hadn't pulled out support." I stood up. "Don't." "What?" "Don't pretend this is my fault. You stood in front of our entire family and told them I was a useless burden. You wanted the business. You wanted control. Now you've got it. And this," I gestured to the hospital bed, "this is what happens when you're too busy playing boss to take care of your own father." He clenched his jaw. "You're being dramatic." I wanted to scream. Instead, I said, "I'm going to stay with him tonight. You can go." He didn't argue. He just left, the smoothie still in his hand, untouched. That night was the first time I truly realized how bad Dad had gotten. He didn't remember the fall. He didn't remember the meeting. But he remembered my name. He remembered that I used to sit on his lap in the shop office while he did payroll, swinging my legs and pretending to type. He whispered, "You still helping your old man?" I swallowed the lump in my throat and lied. "Yeah, Dad, I'm still helping." When I got home the next day, there was a letter taped to my door. A formal notice. From Kyle. He was transferring ownership. He'd had papers drawn up naming himself as majority shareholder. Something Dad had supposedly signed months ago when I was out of town. The letter demanded that I return any remaining business documents I might have, and warned that further interference would result in legal consequences. I stood there on my porch, letter trembling in my hand. That was the moment I stopped being sad. I got angry. And not just for me. For Dad. For the employees Kyle was screwing over. For the legacy he was dragging into the dirt. I'd spent 8 years being invisible. Being the helper. The guy who kept the lights on but never got credit. But if Kyle wanted to see what happened when the burden stopped carrying the load, I'd give him front row seats. Because I wasn't just going to walk away anymore. I was going to watch him fall. And that was when I started planning. I didn't sleep much after I read that letter. It sat on my kitchen table for days. This arrogant piece of paper with Kyle's smug tone bleeding through every word, even though it was typed. He hadn't even signed it himself. It was on behalf of the business, like he was some corporate juggernaut and not a desperate man running a slowly dying auto parts store on fumes and borrowed authority. Still, it was enough to rattle me. Not because I thought he had a legal leg to stand on. I knew the business structure better than he did. But because, for the first time in my life, I realized I didn't have a family to fall back on. I always thought, no matter how bad things got, we'd still be family. Even if Kyle acted like a jerk, even if Mom picked favorites, even if Dad started forgetting what day it was, there'd always be something left. A thread, a sliver, some invisible force that said, we're blood, we stick together. That illusion was gone now. For weeks after the hospital incident, I hit my version of rock bottom. I wasn't homeless, I wasn't broke, but I felt unmoored. Adrift. Like the foundation I'd quietly built my adult life on, loyalty, stability, doing the right thing, had all been a lie. I walked around with this invisible weight on my chest, like I was mourning something I hadn't fully lost yet. I stopped taking calls from old coworkers, ignored emails, skipped meals. I'd go out for walks and not remember where I'd gone. The worst part? I still cared. Despite everything, some irrational part of me still cared about the business. I thought about the front counter and how the bell above the door always rang twice. I thought about Mr. Jennings, the old mechanic who'd come in every Tuesday morning for brake pads and a cup of Dad's terrible instant coffee. I thought about the dusty back room where I once accidentally knocked over a shelf and spent an entire afternoon res-tacking alternators just to avoid telling Dad. And I thought about him, my father, sitting in that hospital bed, asking if I was still helping. I wasn't. I was hiding. That realization gutted me more than anything Kyle could have said. So I decided to stop hiding. The rebuild didn't start with some grand gesture. It started with laundry. One day, I got out of bed, looked around at the mess my apartment had become. Piles of unopened mail, laundry baskets overflowing, dishes crusted with whatever had once resembled food, and thought, enough. I threw on music, opened every window, and started scrubbing my life clean. It sounds stupid, but getting the grime out of my living space helped clear something out of my head, too. Next came the work. I'd put my freelance finance gigs on hold while dealing with Dad and the business fallout, but now I dove back in. I updated my website, reconnected with old clients, polished up my LinkedIn profile, which Kyle had once mocked for being nerdy and useless. Within a week, I had 3 consultations booked. Within a month, I was juggling 5 steady clients, small business owners who actually listened when I spoke, who appreciated clear spreadsheets and budget strategies that didn't involve blindly guessing or blaming the market. And for the first time, I started building something that was mine. Not Dad's, not Kyle's, mine. I rented a small office in a shared workspace. Nothing fancy, just a second-floor unit above a bakery, with the smell of fresh bread wafting in every morning. I bought a real coffee maker, put up a corkboard of my clients and goals, taped a quote above my desk that said, "Just because you're quiet doesn't mean you're not powerful." I started to believe it. Somewhere in that timeline, I also started going back to the hospital. Dad was moved to a memory care facility after another fall, less severe this time, but enough that the doctors recommended round-the-clock supervision. Lauren flew in again to help with the paperwork, and we coordinated visits so someone was always checking in. Kyle didn't show up. Not once. Not even on Dad's birthday. The facility was nice, clean, peaceful. The staff was kind. Dad had good days and bad days. On the good days, he'd tell me stories I'd heard 100 times, but listened to like they were new. On the bad days, he'd think I was one of his old co-workers from the 80s and ask if I'd restocked the carburetors. I never corrected him. Instead, I started writing the stories down. That was Lauren's idea. She'd brought this little leather-bound notebook with her on her last visit, one of those old-school ones with the strap and thick pages, and handed it to me, saying, "If he starts talking, just write it all down. He might forget, but we don't have to." So I did. I wrote down how he once drove through a snowstorm at 3 a.m. to deliver an alternator to a stranded single mom, because she needed to get her kids to school. I wrote how he rigged the office clock to move 5 minutes faster because it made people more punctual. I even wrote the story of how he met Mom at a gas station when she yelled at him for parking too close to her car. Love at first fight, he called it. It became my ritual. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I'd visit, sit with him, and write. He didn't always know who I was, but I knew who he was. And that was enough. Meanwhile, the business, Kyle's empire, was unraveling faster than I'd predicted. Lauren, bless her, was the only one still talking to both of us. One night, she called me late, whispering like she didn't want her husband to hear. Barry, I think he's in real trouble. Kyle, yeah, I checked the business registration online. The warehouse is listed as pending foreclosure. There's a lien from the county for unpaid taxes, and he's behind on payroll. He owes 5 months of back pay to 2 of the employees. I rubbed my temples. Why are you checking that stuff? Because he asked me for a loan, she said flatly. Said he needed 10 grand to patch some holes. I let out a slow breath. Did you give it to him? She hesitated. No, but Mom did. Of course she did. That weekend, I got another visit. Not from Kyle this time. From Jenny. Jenny was one of the shop's oldest employees, late 50s, worked the front counter, knew every customer by name, and probably every part by serial number. She showed up at my office with a Tupperware of banana bread and eyes full of frustration. I know I shouldn't be here, she said, but I don't know who else to talk to. I pulled out a chair for her. What's going on? It's falling apart, Barry. He's not just bad at this. He's dangerous. We've lost 3 major accounts. The shelves are bare. Customers are furious. He's blaming suppliers, the economy, everything but himself. And last week, she paused, her voice breaking. Last week he tried to dock my pay because I wasn't being positive enough. I stared at her. Are you serious? She nodded. I think he's unraveling. And your dad's name is still on some of the legal docs. If the business goes under, he could be on the hook. You all could. That was the moment the rise truly began, not just for my career or my confidence, but for the bigger picture. I realized then that Kyle wasn't just fumbling. He was setting fire to the house while calling it a renovation. And if no one stopped him, there'd be nothing left to save. I promised Jenny I'd look into it. I spent the next few days buried in records, digging through every legal document I could find that still tied Dad to the business. I drove to the county clerk's office, filed a few information requests, called in a favor from a lawyer friend who owed me one. And what I found made my stomach turn. Kyle hadn't transferred ownership, not really. He'd filed paperwork saying he intended to, but the forms weren't signed properly. Dad's signature on the key document? A clear mismatch, likely done during a memory lapse, or, worse, forged altogether. The legal standing of Kyle's ownership was shaky at best, and several debts were still legally under Dad's name. That meant, if the business defaulted, creditors could come after Dad's remaining assets, the ones we were using to pay for his care. Lauren was furious when I told her. We have to fix this, she said. We have to get Dad off those papers. I agreed, but I didn't just want to fix it. I wanted to make sure Kyle never had that kind of power again. And so, I started preparing for a different kind of move. Not one born of pettiness. Not revenge for the sake of ego. Something cleaner. Smarter. Final. Because Kyle thought I'd disappeared quietly into the background. He had no idea I'd been watching everything. Waiting. Planning. And the next time I showed up, I wouldn't be walking out empty-handed. By the time fall rolled around again, I was done playing the passive brother. I'd spent almost a year watching Kyle drown in his own arrogance, dragging our father's name and legacy down with him. I'd given him the chance to step up. I gave the family space to see things clearly. But all it got me was silence from Mom, a hospital bed for Dad, and a slow-motion train wreck of a business that used to feed our family for 30 years. I wasn't going to let Kyle ruin anything else. Not on my watch. And the truth is, I finally had leverage. Remember that lawyer friend I mentioned? His name's Mitchell, a tax attorney I'd helped out years ago when he was dealing with a mess of a nonprofit audit. I built him a full recovery plan, fixed their compliance reports, and saved them nearly $40,000 in penalties. We'd kept in touch. I'd never called in a favor. Until now. Mitchell didn't ask questions. He just met me for coffee, opened his laptop, and said, "Tell me everything." I brought everything I had, printouts, scanned documents, account histories, tax forms, and a copy of the ownership transfer Kyle had waved in my face months ago. Mitchell scanned it, then frowned. This isn't valid. I raised an eyebrow. You sure? Positive. This isn't a notarized signature. It's a photocopy of a signature from a different document. Look at the edges. I leaned in. The margins weren't aligned. The signature box was slightly pixelated. You're telling me this is fake? I'm telling you, he said slowly. This might be forgery. And if it is, and the business is in default, he could be looking at serious legal consequences, especially if your dad's assets are being used for debt coverage without proper authority. I didn't say anything for a long time. Just sat back in the booth, letting that sink in. Mitchell sipped his coffee. What do you want to do with this? I looked out the window, at the people passing by, all of them oblivious to the storm I was quietly organizing. I want to protect my father, and I want my brother to understand that being loud doesn't mean you're right. Mitchell nodded. Then we'll start with a forensic audit. I'll get you a contact who can examine the business finances. If Kyle's been misappropriating anything, or if there are signature inconsistencies, we'll find them. Over the next 2 weeks, we built a paper trail. I wasn't going in guns blazing. This wasn't a tantrum. This was chess. Every piece had to be in place. First, I reached out to Jenny, the longtime employee who'd come to me months ago. I asked if she had any payroll records or memos from Kyle demanding undocumented deductions. She had a stack. I scanned them all. Next, I talked to Lauren again. She'd been hesitant to take sides, but when I told her what Mitchell found, the forged signature, the potential liability Dad still held, she was furious. Furious enough to do something that surprised even me. She flew out again, took time off from her job, and offered to help. Together, we sat with Dad and his care advisor and reviewed the financial risk if the business were to be sued or foreclosed. The advisor nearly choked when she saw how many debts still had Dad listed as a guarantor. Even with his memory fading, we still had legal pathways to remove him, but we needed to act fast. Lauren gave me full power of attorney over Dad's financial decisions. It was like a key turning in a lock I'd been trying to open for years. Now I had the legal authority to investigate everything tied to the business: accounts, contracts, insurance policies, even the warehouse lease agreements. I called the lenders directly. The moment they heard a new voice, one with legal standing, they started singing like canaries. Turns out Kyle hadn't just missed payments. He'd been redirecting cash flow from supplier prepayments to cover payroll, effectively robbing Peter to pay Paul. One late fee had ballooned into 3, then 6. The warehouse had been refinanced under predatory terms. And worse, one of the signatures on the refinance papers, another copy-paste job from an old form Dad had signed back in 2016. Mitchell's contact confirmed it: document tampering. We now had evidence of potential fraud, financial mismanagement, and reckless endangerment of a vulnerable adult's assets. It was enough. But I wasn't done. See, I didn't want to just blow the whistle. I wanted Kyle to see it happen, piece by piece, as everything he thought he controlled slipped through his fingers. So I set the stage. Lauren and I drafted a formal family letter, not an angry rant, but a calm, precise memo. It detailed every document we found, every dollar misused, every legal liability still under Dad's name. We sent it to Mom, Kyle, and the family's old accountant. We didn't accuse anyone of crimes. We simply laid out the facts and said, "This is what we've discovered. We are removing Dad from all financial responsibility immediately. All future decisions will go through his legal power of attorney. Please govern yourselves accordingly." We also included a very polite warning. Any future misrepresentation of ownership, any attempts to use Dad's name or signature without authorization, would result in legal action. We gave Kyle 1 week to respond. He waited 6 days. On the 7th, I got an email with the subject line: "We need to talk." Inside was a single sentence: "I think you're overreacting, but fine. Let's meet." We picked a neutral place, a rented conference room in a business center downtown. I brought Mitchell. Kyle showed up alone, looking tired but still posturing. He walked in, glanced at the documents on the table, and scoffed. "You really brought a lawyer?" Mitchell didn't even look up. "I'm just here to observe." Kyle turned to me. "What do you want, Barry? You trying to take the business now, after abandoning it?" I leaned forward. "I want you to stop dragging Dad into your mess. And I want you to understand that this business, you never owned it." Kyle's face twitched. "You managed it," I continued, "poorly. And you used Dad's name and credit to keep it afloat. But the moment he couldn't protect it anymore, you started forging documents and burning bridges. This isn't about revenge. This is about consequences. He sneered. So what? You're suing me? No, I said calmly. We're auditing you. Mitchell slid a document across the table. We've already filed to remove your authority over all business accounts tied to your father. We're also opening an investigation into the misused funds. You're welcome to cooperate. Kyle didn't say anything for a long time. Then he leaned back, crossed his arms, and said, You think you're so clever, but you're just the boring middle child with a hero complex. Nobody's going to care. I smiled. Oh, they will, I said. Especially the lenders, the state tax board, the insurance company, and the employees you shorted. Then I stood. The question is whether you want to walk away quietly or go down screaming. That was the beginning of the end. But it wasn't the climax. Because Kyle, being Kyle, didn't go quietly. He made one more move. One final, desperate attempt to save face. And it backfired in the most spectacular way possible. Kyle's final move came exactly 9 days after our meeting. I'd been waiting for it. I could feel it coming, like the pressure in the air before a storm. I'd known my brother long enough to recognize that look in his eye. The one that said, You think you've won, but I'm not done. He wasn't the type to back down with grace. Not even when cornered. Especially not when cornered. It came in the form of a counter letter, delivered not through lawyers or a mediator, but shoved into my mailbox in a crumpled manila envelope. No return address, just a thick stack of papers inside and a post-it that read, Since you like documents so much, here's one you missed. I skimmed it, and my stomach twisted. Kyle had filed a request for temporary emergency conservatorship over Dad. Yes, conservatorship. He claimed I was manipulating our father for financial gain, and that Dad's declining mental state made him vulnerable to coercion. According to Kyle's petition, I had seized financial control and was deliberately sabotaging the family business to acquire it at a discounted value. He cited alienation from family members, undue influence, and, of course, personal vendettas. He even got Mom to sign a supporting statement. That part hurt the most. I'd expected Kyle to lash out, but to drag Mom into it, to manipulate her into turning on me after everything I'd done to protect Dad, that was unforgivable. I sat with the papers spread across my kitchen table, my hands shaking, the rage boiling under my skin like lava just under the surface. But I didn't let it explode. I didn't throw the pages or call him screaming. Instead, I called Mitchell, and this time, I let him go full throttle. Mitchell was surgical. He prepared a formal response so sharp it could have cut granite. We compiled medical records proving Dad's diagnosis and our proactive steps in securing his care. We had documentation of every payment I'd made on behalf of the business. We had forensic audit reports showing Kyle's misappropriation of funds, signature manipulation, and tax evasion. We didn't just respond to Kyle's petition. We obliterated it. But that wasn't enough. Not anymore. It was time to take the gloves off. I authorized Mitchell to proceed with civil action. Not to seize the business. I didn't want it anymore, but to protect Dad's assets and reputation. We filed charges for elder financial abuse, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. Mitchell warned me it could get messy, but I wasn't backing down. Not now. Not after what Kyle tried to do. Word spread fast. The employees started whispering. Jenny called to say someone from the county had visited the warehouse asking questions. A few suppliers who hadn't been paid in months filed their own claims. Kyle's house of cards was beginning to sway. But the real death blow came from a place I hadn't expected. The lender. See, once the bank received our notice of potential fraud and invalid authorization on the loan refinance documents, they launched their own internal investigation. It didn't take long for them to confirm what we already knew. The signature on the second warehouse mortgage wasn't just reused. It had been digitally copied and pasted. Sloppily. When they confronted Kyle, he panicked. He tried to blame the bank's notary. Said the clerk must have accidentally used an old signature. But banks don't play games like that. Especially not when the paperwork involves hundreds of thousands of dollars and legal liability. Within 2 weeks, they froze the business account. Within a month, they called the loan. Kyle couldn't cover it. Not even close. And just like that, the warehouse, the heart of Dad's old company, the building that housed 30 years of sweat and grease and handshakes, went into foreclosure. It was poetic in the worst way. I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel joy. I felt empty. But I felt free. Kyle's business license was suspended. His name was flagged in 2 databases for financial misconduct. The IRS started poking around, and from what I've heard through quiet sources, there's a good chance he'll face charges for backdated invoices and tax inconsistencies. He's not in jail. Not yet, but the walls are closing in. Mom called me once after everything came crashing down. She didn't apologize. She didn't even acknowledge what Kyle did. She just said, "You didn't have to destroy your brother." I remember staring at the phone, stunned. "Mom," I said quietly, "I didn't destroy him. He destroyed himself. I just stopped cleaning up the mess." She didn't reply. I haven't heard from her since. Lauren stayed close, though. We've grown stronger through all this. She visits more often, helps with Dad's care, and even helped me finish the little book of Dad's stories. We titled it The Man Behind the Counter and printed 5 copies, one for each of us, and one for Dad's nightstand. On good days, he reads it and smiles like he remembers every word. As for me, I never returned to the business world Dad built. It wasn't mine to reclaim, but I did build something new. My freelance work grew into a boutique financial advisory firm. Small, ethical, no drama. Just good work for good people. Every now and then I'll pass by the old warehouse. The new owners turned it into a distribution hub. They repainted the exterior, fixed the sign, cleaned the windows. It looks different now, but I still see the ghosts of what used to be. The grease-stained uniforms, the morning coffee runs, the laughter echoing from the back office. And I think about the boy I used to be. The quiet one, the burden, the invisible support beam. Turns out, the one they all ignored was the one holding everything up. And when I let go, they finally saw how much weight I'd been carrying. Forever. The funny thing about being the quiet one is, when you finally speak, the whole house hears the echo.